To understand the story of Amenemhat I, how he got into power, you first need to understand the story of his father. This episode was as a result of a question that appeared on a previous episode. The episode was about Sesostris I and what I remember about him from my strange dreams. The question put to me is on the screen at the moment, so I'm going to try and answer that question based on my strange and, I think, extremely interesting dream regressions. So let's start not with Amenemhat I, but his father. His father was a great vizier by the same name. He was a commander of troops, good-looking, well-educated, and an all-round brilliant man. And he was bi. The ruler or pharaoh at the time, who I think was probably Mentuhotep IV, but there's no pictures of him for me to be sure, and these were not the names that I recognized them by. As a general rule, I'm recognizing them by the statues, and since he was the previous ruler, I'm assuming that this is the guy that I saw in my dream. Anyway, in the dream, Mentuhotep IV was gay, and he had wives and concubines in an attempt to continue his line, but it was not successful. He didn't have any children of his own. The Egyptians had some techniques for dealing with this kind of situation because it happened, and so they just had mechanisms which they would employ in order to attempt to encourage the process of having children. But on this occasion it was not successful, so no amount of fluffing could help this pharaoh become functional, at least for the procreation purpose. The pharaoh had eyes only for one person. He adored his vizier, and they eventually became a couple. Fortunately, the vizier had been married, and he was able to have children and did so, and these children were then raised in the royal house. Being gay was only considered a problem if it threatened the continued lineage of the throne, which in this case it did, but that problem didn't worry the pharaoh, and anyone who said anything to that effect or who disrespected his vizier or the vizier's family were removed from the royal household, including direct members of his own family. So most people kept any views against the vizier or his children to themselves. So the pharaoh raised the children of the vizier, so the children of his love, of his champion. He raised them as his own children, and he truly loved them. I don't remember anything about the vizier's wife. I don't remember if she was still around when the vizier and the pharaoh became a couple, or if she'd actually passed away after the children were born. But hey, that is of no consequence to this story. Hopefully she wasn't hurt too much. But this is a love story. How it started, I do not know, but it was true love. When the pharaoh became sick and feared that he might die, he named the son of the vizier as his successor and co-ruler, and this riled some members of his family. But his family had become weakened by interbreeding and the royal lifestyle. The children he raised as his own, i.e. the vizier's children, were bigger, stronger, and incredibly intelligent. It was actually a very good strategic decision on the part of the pharaoh to choose the son of the vizier, but it also felt like he was handing the reins to his own son. After all, he had raised the child as his own. The co-regency that he announced was short-lived, as the pharaoh passed suddenly. Vizier had hoped that his son would get more time with the pharaoh as co-regent before taking on the role himself, and that way he could have learnt much more. But he did his best to fill in any gaps, and he advised his son that in the future, if the same thing happens to him, to try to have a longer time ruling jointly with any successor that he chose. It is not clear if the vizier strategically planned the relationship with the pharaoh, or if it just happened naturally, but it was clear to anyone who saw them together that it was love. They were very well suited. They always had a lot to talk about, they were lovely with each other, and they were very welcoming when we would visit. It was always a pleasure to see them, and we felt safe with them. Nevertheless, we always did take the usual precautions. When Amenemhat took over, as I said, he had a very short co-regency. But since he'd had a royal education, and he'd been active in the military before this, like his birth father, he was actually well prepared for the role, and he proved to be a good ruler. He chose a Nubian wife who was incredibly beautiful, and that too was love. And they were a close-knit, very happy family. And the further racial mix strengthened the already good genes. And this provided great strength for the royal family. And until, of course, more interbreeding of the royals occurred further down the timeline. And so that is how a child totally unrelated to the royal family became a member of the royal family and eventually took over as the pharaoh. And if you haven't already checked out the episode on Sesostris, the first, go check it out and you'll see how well the son of Amenemhat did.